What are some of the common attributes that you see that successful people, billionaires or people worth hundreds of millions, what is it that they have?
They're always trying to educate themselves, constantly trying to educate themselves. They're trying to find out how could they be better or stronger at what they do. When I look at the billionaires, the funny thing about the billionaires is a lot of times they go around and they write down new ways of saving money on taxes. Because if you really think about this, if you're a billionaire and you have a company that's bringing in another $400 million, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of them thinking about how to do a new company, they think, well, why am I going to pay $200 million in taxes? How can I work harder to keep that instead of creating something new so they don't spread themselves too thin? Right?
Yeah.
Like, why create something new to make what I can save right now that I already got? All right? So they think that way. When I'm in the room with billionaires, it's funny. I think I posted this the other day. I'm in the room with dudes who have a little bit of money. They talk about how much money they spent on cars or parties. When I'm in the room with billionaires, they talk about how much money they gave away. Right? Because that's going to come back to them in a whole different way. I also find that they make a lot of mistakes. They don't spread themselves too thin, but they keep trying new things because what that does is it forces them to educate themselves on what's going to work. And they're always up super early in the morning. They're up 5 o'clock. They try to beat the sun up.
It's your boy Quan checking in. Now check it out. Now in that clip, we had none other than the Shark and legendary entrepreneur himself, Daymond John, share a few gems and shed some light on some habits that he's seen in millionaires and billionaires that has made them successful throughout the entirety of their careers. And he said some eye-opening things that really stuck out to me. One of them being is that how millionaires and billionaires are constantly trying to keep educating themselves. I'm a huge advocate for self-education. This is coming from someone who did 4 years in college. And I'm not going to lie to y'all, I thought college was the end-all, be-all. I thought that jobs, they were just supposed to come knocking down my door because I had a degree. And I started to realize quickly it don't quite work like that, right? And there was things that I wasn't even knowledgeable about when I was in school that once I got outside of it, that I had to learn about, which was investing in the stock market, investing in cryptocurrency and business and taxes and credit, all these things that are essential to self-growth. I learned a lot of these things through YouTube, man. YouTube is the best university out there that I like to say. I learned more from YouTube, to be honest with you, than I learned from doing those 4 years in school. And it's no shade to the college, system, but at the end of the day, on YouTube, you can literally research a topic that you're interested in, and you can have it right there at your fingertips. It's right in front of you. And the dope part about it is that it's completely free. It might cost you your time a little bit, but as far as paying out of pocket or anything, most times it's completely free. Now, Daymond John, right, one of the co-founders of, in my opinion, one of the most iconic urban brands ever in Fubu. He has one hell of a story. It's a rag to riches story. He started, Fubu alongside his friends in his mother's house in Hollis, Queens. Shout out to Queens, by the way. And what I loved about his story is, like, nobody really gave him a shot when he first started out, right? So he couldn't get a loan at all when he was trying to, build his clothing brand. He actually got denied by 27 banks. And, his mom really held him down. She really believed in his dream and saw the passion that he had, putting in the work. So his mom comes to him with an idea, and she says, I think I have a way to get you funding because that seems to be an issue for you right now. He says, what? So she decides she's going to take out equity in the house. It was about $100,000. The $100,000 gave Daymond, alongside his friends, the startup capital for Fubu. And, the mom moves out at this point, allows his friends to move in. And these guys are just grinding day in and day out, non-stop. They move all the furniture out. They start to hire seamstresses. And they're really just grinding, right? So, at some point in a couple months in, the $100,000 dwindles down to about $500. And he was really in danger of losing the house because he was behind on his payments. He was just going through a lot of, financial problems at that time. So he decides, hey, I'm going to go back to work at my previous job, which was Red Lobster, where he was doing waitering work there. And he decides to try to save up $2,000. So that $2,000, right, it wasn't the $100,000, but that $2,000 actually saved him because what his mom did, because it just seemed like she was just coming to him with different ideas every time he would have a roadblock. She decides to say, hey, let's take out an ad in the newspaper. This is the best I got at this point. You got to remember that he's in the hole, right? Down to a couple $100. And this is the best that they came up with. But it turns out that was probably one of the most smartest, business decisions that they did. So the ad in the New York Times, and you got to remember, the newspaper at that time in the 90s was everything. It's not today where, we got social media, you can rush to Twitter and get your news first. It's like the newspaper was how you got your news, how you got your information. So, New York Times was one of the biggest, newspapers in the entire country at that time. So taking out an ad was a pretty big deal. So the ad is titled, $1 million in orders. It just needs financing. And what that did was he said, that they did get a couple of individuals that were a little shady, right? As you would imagine. But he said, one guy, his name was Norman Wisefield. He was the president of Samsung's textile division. That was the phone call that really changed the trajectory of Fubu. So they get on the phone. He says, okay, I'll give you your financing. Let's do a distribution deal, right? But the catch is, you have to sell $5 million of clothes over the next 3 years. And, Daymond and his friends have said, listen, no problem, because we already got these orders. We just need the financing. So Fubu wound up doing, I want to say $30 million in sales in clothing in 3 months. And it really started to, take a life on its own after that deal, was made. And listen, I'm not going to lie to y'all, okay? I had a Fubu coat myself. I had the bubble coat with the Timbs, with the hats, man. I mean, that's a story for another time. But, in all seriousness, when they were at their peak, they were a force in hip hop. They had rappers such as E40, Dr. Dre, Nas. They even had one of the biggest boy bands of all time, NSYNC, wearing their clothing, which showed you the reach that, the branding power was of Fubu. And of course, how could you forget about LL Cool J, which if you ask any of the founders, they are all on record stating that he was a major catalyst for their success. And it's a funny story how, Fubu actually became mainstream in America at that point, right? So in 1997, Gap calls up LL to do a commercial, and he's wearing a Fubu hat. They don't care because they don't know who Fubu is. And so as he's rapping along in the commercial, he says Fubu's slogan, which was,
"For us, by us, on the low. For us, by us, on the low. For us, by us, on the low."
Now, obviously, the Gap execs weren't too pleased with LL mentioning another brand within their own commercial. And it's understandable, right? Because when you pay someone to appear in an ad for you, you want them to rep your brand and rep your brand only. And going off the script and doing otherwise could potentially confuse the viewer. And shout out to LL, man, because he understood the power that Gap had over kids at that time and just families in general. He knew that they would be watching this commercial or just Gap commercials in general. And he took his shot and the opportunity to, provide exposure to Fubu during that time slot. And, it worked. And as a result, Gap blows up and Fubu blows up simultaneously because you had a lot of kids running to the Gap stores to buy a Fubu merch. The only problem during that time was that Fubu wasn't carried in any of the Gap stores. So Gap realized, like, wait a minute, we got a whole different target market that we weren't even able to tap into prior to this commercial. So let's further a business relationship. They start carrying Fubu in their stores across the U.S. and any of their other outlet stores that they had as well. And Fubu, it was a win-win for them because now they got a different target market that they weren't even able to tap into prior to that commercial airing. And if you look at the timeline of the events, so Fubu was founded in 1992, but like I mentioned earlier in the vid, things started to really change the course once they got that call from Norman Wisefield from Samsung's textile division. Then, of course, the LL situation happens after that, and the rest is history, right? Fubu's done about $6 billion in sales to date, which is impressive because Daymond, Keith, Alex, Carlton, and them, they face a ton of obstacles on their path to really building a clothing empire, and they pushed through anyway. They wouldn't take no for an answer. They always found a solution to every problem that they face, and that's why they're successful. And that's why that book, The Power of Broke, which is written by Daymond, really resonated with me because he was saying, like, look, we built this from nothing, but sometimes not having a whole bunch of money can breed greatness out of you because when your back is against the wall, you're forced with a choice and a decision that you got to make. It's either you going to stand tall or you're going to fall at the end of the day. And these guys stood tall and they made it through. So shout out to these guys and what they accomplished. They built their empire really off of building the right relationships and networking with the right people. And that helped them put them in a position to win, which is integral to anyone's success, right? So given that said, man, that's all I got for y'all today. I appreciate y'all tuning in as always. And let me know what y'all think in the comment section. I'm out till next time.